Have you ever wondered what really happens when God draws near? I'm not talking about a feeling, a chill, or even goosebumps. I'm talking about real evidence, visible signs, irreversible shifts, supernatural movements that leave no room for doubt. When the King enters a place, his arrival is never silent. Miracles don't just happen, they announce something. Today, we're going to explore the undeniable signals that tell us God is here. Ready to recognize them, let's step in. When God is truly near, you don't have to guess. You don't have to assume. You don't have to rely on goosebumps or a good choir or emotional hype. Because when the presence of God invades a place, there is evidence. There are signs you cannot fake and outcomes you cannot manufacture. You don't need someone to convince you. Because when God shows up, his glory speaks for itself. One of the first signs is transformation. Not the kind that takes years, but the kind that happens in moments. A heart of stone becomes flesh. A broken spirit gets mended without therapy. Minds become clear. Peace replaces anxiety. When God enters the room, something inside of you shifts, and you don't even know how it happened. That's not motivation. That's not self-help. That's divine evidence. Another sign, clarity. Confusion has to leave when God is near. Why? Because where his spirit is, there is light, and where light shines, darkness cannot stay. Suddenly, what was complicated becomes simple. What was hidden becomes visible. You hear instructions. You receive direction. You recognize purpose. It's as if the fog lifts, and you can finally see. That's when you K in a woo. God is in this place. And what about favor? Oh yes, favor begins to chase you. Things that were locked open without effort. People start blessing you, and they don't even know why. Promotions you didn't qualify for. Doors you didn't knock on. Emails you didn't send. Why? Because when God is near, his presence draws resources, connections, provision, and grace. His nearness changes your atmosphere and causes even your enemies to step back and wonder. Healing is another undeniable sign. Not just physical healing, although that happens too, but emotional and generational healing. Cycles break, addictions die. The trauma you carried for years begins to lose its grip. You start walking lighter, freer, and people ask, what happened to you? And you smile because you know he happened. When God is near, wholeness becomes your new normal. And then there's authority. You begin to speak differently, pray differently, move differently, not because of pride, but because you carry the weight of presence. Demons recognize it. Environments respond to it. You don't walk into rooms, you shift them. And it's not about being loud, it's about being full. Full of the one who is near, full of the one who is present. So how do you know God is near? Look for the evidence, the real kind. The kind that no man can produce, signs that align with his nature, truth, power, glory, restoration, peace. But that's just the beginning, because when heaven touches earth, something even greater begins to unfold. What happens when the kingdom atmosphere itself begins to manifest? Stay with me, it's about to get deeper. When heaven touches earth, it's not quiet. It's not ordinary. It doesn't go unnoticed. When God draws near, the natural realm begins to respond to the weight of the supernatural. Environments shift. Atmospheres change. And people, even those who don't believe, start to sense that something divine is happening. That's because when heaven touches earth, you are no longer in a normal place. You are standing in a divine collision between eternity and time. God does not visit the earth without leaving traces. When his presence touches down, there is a reaction. Just like lightning striking the ground leaves evidence, charred, scorched, shaken. So does the presence of God leave behind undeniable marks. The atmosphere becomes charged. Rooms feel heavy with glory. People feel the weight, not of sorrow, but of sacredness. You're not just on a building, you're in a sanctuary. Something Howell is taking place. And whether you're in a church, a car, or a prison cell, heaven can touch earth anywhere when God is near. And here's the truth: heaven doesn't visit casually. It comes with intention. God's nearness is always on purpose. So when heaven touches earth, it begins to rearrange things. Things out of order start to align. Broken things begin to repair. What was barren begins to produce. What was dead starts to live again. This is not emotional hype. It is divine activation. You can't explain it, but you can't deny it. Miracles become movement, and movement becomes momentum. People in the room begin to weep, not because they're sad, but because something inside them is being restored. Others fall to their knees, not out of ritual, but out of reverence. Some begin to worship uncontrollably, not because of the song, but because they've tapped into a realm that their soul has been aching for. That's what happens when heaven comes close. It unlocks the deepest parts of us that earth could never reach. And when heaven touches earth, language changes. Complaining turns into gratitude. Gossip turns into prayer. Weakness becomes worship. Words start carrying weight. Conversations shift. The way we see people changes. Forgiveness flows freely. You start to feel what God feels. You begin to hear what God hears. You move from just attending to actually encountering. And from that moment on, you're never the same. So what does all this mean? It means God isn't far. It means his kingdom isn't just up there. It's at hand. It's available. It's within reach. But here's the key. Are we sensitive enough to recognize the signs? Because when the kingdom atmosphere begins to manifest, it brings with it a disruption, a holy disturbance. But what exactly gets disrupted when God steps in? Get ready, because next we're going to talk about what happens when the natural order is completely rearranged. When God is among us, truly among us, you won't need a sign on the door. You won't need a social media post to announce it. You won't need a fancy flyer or a smoke machine, because the environment will testify. The people will witness. The room itself will begin to declare, he is here. His presence doesn't need promotion. It announces itself through undeniable power and unmistakable results. You walk into the space and it feels different. You sit down, but your spirit stands up. You weren't expecting much, but suddenly tears begin to roll down your cheeks. Nobody touched you. Nobody called your name. But somehow you feel seen. You feel known. You feel drawn. That's not emotion. That's presence. That's when you know God is among us. And it's not just about goosebumps. It's not just about chills. It's not even about loud noise. When God is among us, there is alignment. There is weight. There is authority. Conversations shift. Casualness disappears. People start repenting before there's even a message. Worship flows without needing a leader. The presence becomes the leader. That's when you know the agenda has changed. He has taken over the meeting. Even children start sensing it. People who came just to check it out start breaking. Hardened hearts begin to melt. Skeptics begin to weep. Addicts begin to feel free before deliverance is even announced. Marriages start to heal without counseling. That's not strategy. That's divinity in motion. That's what happens when the living God walks in the room. There's a silence that falls, but it's not empty. It's full of glory, full of reverence, full of awe. People stop moving. Phones stop distracting. It's like the entire room realizes we're not in control anymore. That's when you know you're standing on holy ground. And just like Moses at the burning bush, something in you wants to take your shoes off because you recognize this space is now sacred. And miracles, oh yes, they begin to flow without manipulation, without a script. Bodies get healed in the back row. Minds are restored without a microphone. People start dancing with freedom they never had. Chains start falling, not just off one person, but across the entire room. Why? Because God didn't send an angel. He didn't send a word, he came himself. And when he comes, nothing stays the same. This is more than revival. This is divine visitation. This is the king walking through his own kingdom. His presence not borrowed. His glory not copied. His power not delegated. But what happens when God not only shows up, but begins to interrupt the natural order of things? Next, we're going to uncover the moments where the laws of this world bend to the will of heaven. And trust me, it only gets deeper from here. When God steps in, the natural order gets disrupted. What was predictable becomes unpredictable. What was certain becomes questionable. What was impossible becomes normal. Why? Because the kingdom of God does not operate by earth's rules. It does not submit to natural law. It overrides it. When the supernatural collides with the natural, something has to give. And trust me, it's never God who bends. Look all throughout Scripture. When God showed up, nature responded. Waters parted, walls fell. Fire refused to burn, lions went silent, axe heads floated. Manna rained from heaven, shadows healed the sick. Time stood still. Even death itself had to bow. Why? Because when the Creator walks into creation, creation submits. Everything created knows his voice. And when he speaks, the laws of nature obey. That's why when God is near, you'll start seeing things that break logic. A person with cancer gets a clean report, and the doctors have no explanation. Someone with no degree lands a CEO position, and they can't explain it. A womb called barren suddenly begins to carry life. A person who was overlooked for years is suddenly accelerated overnight. That's not luck. That's a divine override. That's what happens when heaven refuses to wait for earth's permission. You see, the presence of God doesn't ask for approval. It doesn't need a vote. When God moves, it may not make sense, but it always makes impact. And often, his miracles don't come with warning. They don't come with announcement. They just appear. One moment you're weeping in prayer. The next, the debt is paid. One moment you're begging for breakthrough. The next, the door swings open. That's what happens when the king decides, now is the time. But hear this. This kind of divine disruption doesn't come to entertain. It comes to realign. When God starts breaking the natural order, it's because he's resetting your direction. He's restoring your identity. He's awakening your spirit. You were never meant to live by earth's limitations. You were born to function under kingdom conditions. And that means walking by faith, not by sight. Living by vision, not by fear. Moving by instruction, not by impulse. So when everything around you starts looking upside down, don't panic. Don't assume it's warfare. It might just be God flipping the script because he's near, he's close, he's involved. And when he's involved, rules get rewritten. But here's the real question. How do you know it's really him? How do you discern whether what you're seeing is God's hand or just coincidence? Get ready, because next we're going to learn how to identify the unmistakable signature of God in every move, every moment, and every miracle. When God steps in, the environment doesn't stay the same. The moment he enters, the moment his presence touches down, everything begins to shift. But here's what's even more powerful. It's not just that something changes, it's how it changes. Because when God moves, he always leaves his signature. He leaves behind marks, fingerprints, patterns that reveal this was not man, this was God. You see, there are things people can fake. Emotions can be stirred. Crowds can be manipulated. Smoke and lights can create moments. But there is one thing no man can duplicate: the authentic imprint of heaven. It's that moment when something happens that no one can take credit for. It wasn't the preacher. It wasn't the worship. It wasn't the program. Something divine touched it, and only God could have done this. The signature of God is excellence without effort. It's results without human explanation. It's timing so perfect, No one could have orchestrated it. You didn't plan it, but it happened. You didn't qualify, but you got it. You didn't understand it, but peace flooded your soul. That's not randomness. That's not chance. That's the intentional hand of God signing his name across the pages of your life. And here's what's beautiful. His signature always matches his nature. So what he touches reflects who he is. If he touches your heart, it becomes whole. If he touches your mind, it becomes sound. If he touches your gift, it multiplies. If he touches your life, it begins to bear fruit. Not because you're trying harder, but because his hand is on it. You'll also know his signature because of the fruit it leaves behind. Not just hype, not just a moment, but lasting impact. Marriages healed, purpose clarified, generations changed. When God moves, he doesn't just stir a crowd, he repositions destiny. And when the atmosphere is filled with his signature, every soul in the room knows we've just encountered the real thing. And here's another layer. When God signs something, no man can erase it. When he marks your life, when he seals your calling, when he stamps his favor, no devil, no critic, no mistake, and no delay can undo it. His signature is final. His word is permanent. His movement is undeniable. So if you're asking, is God really near? Look for the evidence, yes. But more than that, look for his handwriting. Look for the things that can't be copied. Look for the outcomes that defy logic. Look for the stories that begin with, there's no way I could have done this myself. But now, here's the twist. When God is near and his signature is visible, something else starts to happen. The spiritual climate begins to shift. What does that mean? What does it look like when the very air around you becomes kingdom charged? Let's go deeper. It's about to get intense. When the presence of God becomes real in a place, the climate changes. And I'm not talking about temperature. I'm not talking about the thermostat on the wall. I'm talking about the spiritual atmosphere, the unseen environment that affects everything. When God is near, the air becomes different, not physically, spiritually. And when the spiritual climate shifts, the natural world has no choice but to respond. You walk into a room and you don't even know why, but you feel lighter, you feel safer, you feel peace before anyone even speaks. That's climate. You didn't hear a sermon, but something in the air told your spirit you're in the presence of the King. The chaos that was tormenting your mind begins to dissolve. The fear that was gripping your heart starts to let go. That's not a vibe. That's not a mood. That's the evidence of heaven's atmosphere entering earth's domain. Where God is, there is liberty. And liberty isn't just freedom to shout. It's freedom to breathe, freedom to forgive, freedom to dream again. That's why when the climate shifts, people shift too. Cold hearts begin to warm. Hardened minds begin to open. Faith starts rising. Worship becomes easy. Prayer becomes powerful. Healing becomes normal. And the impossible, it becomes expected. And let me tell you, when the climate is right, God does more in minutes than man can do in years. A word that might have bounced off last week suddenly pierces your heart this week. A song that sounded average before now takes you into the throne room. People who walked in bound walk out delivered, and nobody laid hands on them. What happened? The climate was prepared. The spiritual atmosphere was charged, but climate doesn't shift accidentally. It's not a coincidence. It's the result of divine nearness. When the King steps into the room, his presence carries a weight, and that weight shifts everything. That's why the devil doesn't want you in the right atmosphere, because when the air is charged with glory, oppression breaks, depression flees, confusion loses its grip, doubt gets silenced. And when the climate shifts, miracles don't feel rare. They feel right. They feel expected. You don't beg, you receive. You don't strive, you trust. Because the atmosphere of heaven is now resting in your environment. And in that kind of atmosphere, anything is possible. But hear me, when God changes the climate, He's preparing for something greater. He's not just shifting the air, He's shifting the season. He's about to bring visible results to match the invisible changes. So the question is, what happens when that invisible atmosphere starts manifesting invisible miracles? What does it look like when signs and wonders aren't occasional, but become a new normal? Stay with me, because next, we're stepping into the manifestation of glory. When God draws near, His glory doesn't hide. It doesn't whisper. It manifests. You begin to see with your eyes what your spirit already knew. Things that once took faith to imagine now appear in plain sight. The invisible becomes visible. The atmosphere that shifted in the spirit, it starts producing real, undeniable outcomes in the natural. That's what glory does. It's not just a feeling, it's a manifestation. You'll know God's glory is present when things start happening that no human effort can explain. The kind of healing that leaves doctors stunned. The kind of provision that shows up without paperwork. The kind of breakthrough that doesn't make sense based on your background, your credit score, or your family name. When the glory of God fills a space, heaven invades earth, and miracles become your new normal. Glory isn't just a cloud, it's a climate of completion. Things that were delayed start moving. Prayers that were pending start getting answered. You don't even have to beg, you simply believe. And suddenly the answer is at your doorstep. Glory is the evidence that God hasn't just visited. He's established dominion. It means He's not passing through. He's settling in. When His glory is revealed, deliverance happens without shouting. Chains break in silence. Addictions lose power. Years of trauma begin to unravel in seconds. People start weeping, not because of pain, but because of the weight of joy, freedom, and light that has filled their soul. You look around, and people are on their knees, not because they're told to, but because they're undone by the presence. And watch this, where glory is order follows, confusion leaves, division dies, unity rises, because glory brings alignment. It corrects motives, it purifies intentions. It silences the flesh and elevates the spirit. When glory is in the room, you don't care who's watching. You don't care what time it is. You just want more of Him, because nothing else satisfies. Nothing else compares. And when the glory falls, gifts begin to activate. People who never preached begin to prophesy. Those who were afraid to pray start praying boldly. Dreams start surfacing. Callings get confirmed. That's because glory unlocks destiny. It doesn't just touch you, it reveals you. You start becoming the person heaven always saw before earth ever labeled you. But don't miss this. When glory starts to manifest, so does resistance. Because the enemy never attacks what's ordinary. He only targets what's divine. And when God begins to move in glory, darkness tries to respond. But here's the good news. When the enemy comes in like a flood, God lifts up a standard. But what happens when the standard isn't a strategy, it's a person? Next, we're about to explore how you become the evidence of God's presence. Yes, you. When God is truly near, you won't just see the miracles around you. You'll start to see something change in you. That's when you know the presence hasn't just visited, it's taken residence. You don't just witness glory. You begin to carry it. You become the walking evidence, the living testimony, the breathing proof that God has been in your life. You start walking into rooms and things shift, and you don't even know why yet. You're not trying to be deep. You're not chasing titles. But suddenly, people begin to feel peace when you speak. They begin to feel hope when you pray. They feel convicted, not by your words, but by your presence. That's not charisma, that's not personality. That's the weight of God's presence resting on a person who's been in the secret place. You no longer need to announce that you're anointed. Your life announces it for you. People come to you and say, I don't know what it is, but when I'm around you, I feel different. That's when you know you've become the evidence. You've moved beyond church attendance, beyond performance, beyond just receiving miracles. Now, you carry the atmosphere of heaven wherever you go. And here's the shift. Your words begin to carry authority. Not because you shout, but because there's weight behind your whisper. You don't need to prove anything because the Holy Spirit confirms everything. You lay hands and healing flows. You intercede and things begin to shift. You speak and doors start to open. That's not because of your name. That's because of his name on your life. When God is near, he doesn't just do things for you. He starts doing things through you. Your life becomes a vessel. Your schedule becomes a weapon. Your obedience becomes strategy. You don't just wait for revival. You carry it. You don't beg for fire. You burn with it. Why? Because his glory has made you an extension of his kingdom. You're not just in the move of God. You've become part of it. And it's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's the stillness, the calm, the decisions you make in silence, the love you show in secret, the favor that follows you quietly, the grace that covers you daily. You begin to understand this isn't about status, this is about assignment. You weren't called to be famous, you were called to be faithful. Because when you carry the presence, your life becomes a message the world can't ignore. But here's the truth. When you become the evidence, there's a cost. You can't blend in anymore. You can't shrink. You can't play small. You were chosen to reveal the kingdom. And that raises a deeper question. What happens when the world begins to respond to what you carry? Next, we'll uncover how environments begin to react when the kingdom shows up through you. When you truly carry the presence of God, you don't enter rooms, you shift them. You don't just blend into environments, you transform them. Why? Because when God is near and you've been with him, you don't come empty. You come full of wisdom, full of light, full of authority, and full of kingdom power. And the moment you walk in, darkness starts losing its grip. People around you won't always understand it. Some will be drawn to you. Others might resist you. Why? Because when you carry presence, you expose atmosphere. You reveal what's not aligned. You stir up what's been hiding. But don't be discouraged. That's exactly what happens when the kingdom shows up through you. You're not just participating in revival. You are the revival someone's been praying for. Remember, Jesus said, "You are the light of the world," not a suggestion, a declaration. So when you step into dark places, whether it's your workplace, your home, your school, or your city, things can't stay the same. Peace enters with you. Wisdom walks in with you. Heaven touches down, not because of your title, but because of your intimacy with the King. You start seeing things differently. You speak life when others speak doubt. You stand firm when others are shaking. You respond with grace when others react in fear. That's what kingdom looks like in motion. And guess what? The environment notices. Spirits notice. People notice. Suddenly, those who mocked you begin to seek you. Those who ignored you begin to listen. Not because of you, but because of the God in you. And this is where it gets powerful. When enough people carry that same presence, entire cities can shift. Families can change. Culture can transform. The presence of God isn't limited to buildings. It flows through surrendered lives. That means your office can become a sanctuary. Your lunch table can become a healing altar. Your voice note can carry deliverance. You don't need a microphone. You just need obedience. And when you carry God's presence, even your shadow carries power. But be warned, the enemy will try to distract you. He'll try to make you second guess what you carry. He'll whisper, "You're not good enough." But here's the truth: you were never supposed to be enough. His strength is made perfect in your weakness. All you have to do is stay full, stay connected, stay aligned, because environments respond to what's real. So now the question is, how do you sustain this presence? How do you remain in a posture that keeps heaven flowing through you day after day? Get ready, because next we're going to unlock the mystery of what really happens when you live under an open heaven. When you live under an open heaven, you don't chase blessings. Blessings begin to chase you. You don't strive for favor. Favor follows you. You don't beg for breakthroughs. Breakthroughs find you in the secret place when God is near and heaven is open over your life. You operate in a rhythm that's not controlled by the earth. It's governed by kingdom access. An open heaven means there's no resistance between you and the voice of God. You don't just hear Him, you discern Him clearly. Instructions become precise. Timing becomes supernatural. You start moving not just with faith, but with divine accuracy. Delays no longer disturb you. Doors don't intimidate you. Why? Because when heaven is open, you live in sync with the King, and everything around you has to adjust to your alignment. Provision flows differently. Ideas come faster. Creativity increases. Wisdom multiplies. You walk into places that should have broken you, and instead you build in them. You function in rest while others fight in stress. That's what happens when you're not living under pressure. You're living under presence. You become a magnet for heaven's resources. People can't explain it, but they can't deny it. But hear this: an open heaven isn't just about blessings falling, it's about assignments rising. You begin to sense new responsibilities, bigger vision, greater weight, because when God opens the heavens, He also opens your capacity. You're no longer just surviving, you're stewarding, managing, multiplying. Why? Because now heaven trusts you. And under an open heaven, prayer changes. You no longer pray out of routine. You pray from revelation. You don't just ask for things, you declare them. You legislate, you establish, you decree. Because now you're not begging like a servant. You're operating like a citizen of the kingdom. Heaven backs your voice. Angels respond to your words. Why? Because your life has become a legal portal between realms. This is the realm where time gets redeemed. What took years happens in months. What was broken gets restored in moments. You don't have to prove anything. Your fruit speaks for you. You live in a place where your yes to God opens doors no man can shut. So what does all this mean? It means the supernatural is supposed to be natural to you. It means signs and wonders were never supposed to be rare. They were meant to follow those who believe. It means you were never called to live beneath your identity. You were designed to live from a place of divine connection. Heaven was always meant to be near. God was always meant to dwell, not just visit. So today, don't settle for visitation. Step into habitation and let the world see what happens when God is truly near.